look, you've recently appeared on all kinds of media. Right? I mentioned Piers Morgan then, but you've had debates on his show with the likes of kind of Rabbi Shmuley and Alan Dershowitz. Recently you've been on Lex Friedman's podcast. You did that sort of panel debate with the streamer Destiny, but he has another name. But you sort of I think you kept calling him something different. But anyway, you're talking to me now, right? And as an academic that has devoted decades of research,
my whole adult life,
your entire adult life, right, to the Israel Palestine situation. I mean, how do you prepare yourself to kind of debate with people who are far more politicized and often, to be honest, far less knowledgeable, right, of the situation than you are? You're kind of in this space with people, I'm mainly thinking about Destiny now, who are just frankly unqualified to be engaging with you on the subject matter, and yet you're kind of having to do it, right, to access the audience and to make these points and to open people up to your research and work, your academia.
First of all, I'm in debt to anyone who gives me a platform. Now, it's not because, as Bernie Sanders used to say, our senator who ran for office, his campaign slogan was, "It's not about me, it's about us." So if I'm grateful for the platform, it's not about me. I could say that with absolute certainty. I never sought the limelight. Gaza was not the most popular issue on the block. I invested in it because I felt a duty to record for history, not for the present, what was being done or what had been done to the people of Gaza. When October 7th happened, I was suddenly in demand, but contrary to the optical illusions of the web, I've actually not been in many places at all. You'll be very surprised. Apart from Piers Morgan, who had me on 4 times, and on all 4 occasions acquitted himself responsibly and with dignity, in my opinion, I've not been on any of the mainstream media, none. If you were to ask, have I been on ABC News, NBC News, CBS News? Have I been on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC? Has my name been mentioned in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the New York Review of Books, the New Yorker Magazine, Atlantic Magazine, Los Angeles Times? Answer, no, full stop, no qualifications. What happened is, because of the nature of the web, number one, I get a lot of views, but it's only from a handful of programs. I've not been on Your Hard Talk. Triggerometry, that program, it 3 times booked me and 3 times canceled me before I could appear on. Yes, I have the email correspondence. They booked me and then they canceled me. I've not been on almost anywhere, but because I possess a knowledge, not because I was born with the Gaza gene, but because I work hard. And I was the only person to invest my whole mental being in that topic. And as a responsibility, I won't say I possess the truth. I'll say I'm confident I possess a larger portion of the truth than anybody else out there, not because of genius, but because of hard work. So in that sense, it's lives that are at stake. I am very tired right now. I was not prepared for what befell me after October 7th. And I had a whole stack of books on 1,000 different topics that I wanted to read about. And now, once again, I don't want to say burdened, but I have to carry the weight of Gaza. And whenever I feel exhausted, as I often do, I keep telling myself, well, how must the people of Gaza feel after 6.5 months of this horror of fleeing and fleeing and fleeing? If you're in the north, go to the south. And then they go to the south. And then Israel drops these 2,000 pound bombs, these 2 ton bombs in Rafah, where they told them to flee. And then they're told to flee here. And then they're given this grid, and they're saying, go to this space in the grid, go to that space in the grid. You take it like a checkerboard, but multiply it 1,000 times. And that's what these grids that Israel distributes. And they're rushing, and they're rushing, and they're rushing. And in the midst of the rushing, they're being killed, and they have to bury their dead. And then they have to dig up from the rubble those who might still be alive under the rubble. Then they have to go for water, and then they have to go for food, and then they have to go to the convoys, rushing, 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 burying the dead, pulling out the maybe alive. I say, Norm, you live a charmed life, you keep going. So, and I'm grateful for anyone. The thought that always clings to me is everybody clings to their life. Their life. Each of us clings to it. And if you save one life in Gaza, it could be your own. And I cling to my life. So I have no great hopes for what I'm doing, but one life is still something. It might be your own. So I'm grateful to anybody who will have me on, not for me. I'm an old man now. I always say to my friends, if I were 45 and this were happening to me, it's a step on the career ladder, even though frankly, it's a sick. Because what is it? I'm only a known quantity now because people are dying in droves. That's the only reason I'm a known quantity. If people were happy in Gaza, nobody would give a damn about me, my book, my knowledge, or anything else. So I have to always maintain the self-possession of remembering, if I'm now a known quantity, it's because thousands, and they're now saying tens of thousands of Palestinians are going to die in this man-made famine. It would be a sin against the memory of what happened to my parents, were I to take pride in the position I'm in now. When my mother, for example, talked about the war, she didn't talk about the barbarities, and she never talked about her family. I have no idea what happened to my mother's family. Every member was exterminated. I have no idea what happened to my father's family. Every member exterminated. But my mother always talked about the hunger in the ghetto in particular, the Warsaw ghetto, the hunger. And so for me now to take pride in the fact that I was on Piers Morgan 4 times, no, that would be a sin against the horrors that my parents endured. And the second thing is, I'm an old man. My life is behind me. It's not an item now for my resume. It's not going to get me a plum position. All my friends are retired. So I don't have, so to speak, a professional dog in this race. I don't. Sometimes when I get a little, I get a little carried away with myself. I do. My mother used to, whenever I got carried away with myself, she used the expression, clip my wings, to remind me, Norman, don't get carried away with yourself. And whenever I get carried away, I say, Norm, you have like 15 years left to live. This is not a feather in your cap. So I'm glad to be there. If I can save that one life, could be my own. And I do believe I know more, only because of hard work. No genes. I was very close friends for 40 years with Professor Chomsky. He was my mentor. And I think it's fair to say I was his disciple and protege. Not his only disciple and protege, but one among several. That's correct. But I was in his physical presence for 40 years. I know genius. I do. I know genius. I'm not by a wide margin. But I work hard. I always work hard. And I'm responsible for people dying, and by some strange turn of fate, I found myself in the strange position that all of a sudden I was the world's leading authority on this subject. It could have been the South Sahara. It could have been the Kurds. It could have been East Timor. It could have been 1,000 different places. But I turned out to be the world's leading authority on this tiny, tiny little place, which is actually in population smaller than Brooklyn, New York, where I live. And I happen to know, in terms of the detail, the documentary detail, not the physical topography, but in documentary detail, I just happen to know more than anybody else, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to battle on, and do what I can to reveal, to expose, not what happened on October 7th and thereafter, because there's a lot of good material out there now. Those UN agencies have documented from beginning October 8th the horrors that were inflicted. So I'm really unnecessary for that. If you look at the South Africans' application to the International Court of Justice, it's 84 single-spaced pages with hundreds and hundreds of footnotes from the UN agencies. So I'm not needed there, but I know what happened before October 7th. I know what happened to the battered woman for 20 years because I was the next door neighbor. Before she killed her spouse, I know what brought her to that point. I heard the screams. I heard the banging. I saw how physically battered she was. So when I heard that she killed her husband and she stabbed him 100 times, and all of the tabloids had as the headlines, "Monster woman stabs husband 100 times," I know what preceded those 100 stabbings.